Good morning, everybody. MG here. MGCovers bringing you a brand new sports handicapping video. Title of this video, The Secret Strategy for Bankroll Management. It's one word. I'm super excited to bring this to you. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a chart and a formula that you can calculate on your own. Very simple. All you need to know is how much money you have for your bankroll, and it calculates everything for you. It's very super simple. We'll share that at the end of the video. But first, before we dive into the actual video, I want to go through Major League Baseball model. Having a ton of success. We're on a 16-6 run. Year-to-date model is 167, 136. Hit a new high yesterday with 44.08 units. The model last year was at 47 units. Completely different model. Had my fingers crossed. The goal would be to end at 50 plus units, which I've never done in my career. It would be the quote greatest model performance I've ever had of any model. So super excited, but also understanding late in the season model could lose its edge. So far it hasn't. It's been profitable since the changes we made June 16th. So super excited about Major League Baseball and closing out the rest of the year. Okay, let's dive into some bankroll management stuff here. Now, I'm going to show you some actual wagers and use examples as I explain this, but all you really need to know, the secret strategy for bankroll management is one word. It's called cash flow. You hear a lot of sharps talk about the Kelly criteria, which I don't use. It can work. It's just something that I don't use. But my whole strategy around bankroll management and how I make daily wagers is based on cash flow. And before I dive into that, I want to tell you a story because this makes a lot of sense. If you go back when I was growing up, my parents owned a Western auto store. I worked with my mom, and her big thing was cash flow. So a big mistake people make in this industry, they don't treat this like a business. It's a business. You're trying to profit. And her whole premise was she wanted to cash flow every single day. And let me give you an example. Let's say we made only $200 profit for the day. Like that was our net profit. And we had some advertising that we wanted to do in the local newspaper. Say that ad cost us $300. We would not pay for that advertising that day, because if we paid for it, we would be negative 100 for the day. So we didn't pay for the newspaper advertisement. We would just go home knowing we made $200 profit. Let's say the next day we had a really good day. We made $1,200 profit. Now we would pay for the newspaper advertising. Why? Because if that newspaper ad cost $300, we made $1,200 profit. $1,200 minus 3, we would net out $900. So we cash flow the day before $200. We cash flow the next day $900. And that's basically how I run my sports betting. Now let's dive in and look at this first example. This was from July 31st. And you'll notice the very first wager we made, this was an afternoon game. The model had Miami at plus 225. Now the max that I wager is going to be 1,000 per day. And I'll explain that at the end, but just keep that in mind. The max I'll wager per day would be 1,000. Sometimes it's less, but the max is 1,000. So our very first wager we make, this wins, Miami wins. So now that's $333 plus $225. We're up $750 for the day, right? Now, we had two more wagers via the model. Hypothetically, let's say this. Let's say we wager Boston the same amount as Miami, $333, and we wager $333 on Oakland. And let's say hypothetically Boston loses and Oakland loses. Our net for the day, after being up $750, would be $84 net. So we win Miami, but then we lose Boston and then lose Oakland. This happens a lot to people in sports betting, right? A 1 and 2 day is very common. So under that scenario, we'd only make $84. So going back to working with my mom, if my mom calls me midday, hey, how much profit have we made for today? We made $750. And then she called later in the day. What did we end up with? We ended up with $84. Her question would be, what happened? We're not thinking in terms of cash flowing. So in this scenario, what I did was, okay, we win the first wager. We're up $750. The next wager, I lowered that to what I call 1/5 unit, only wager 200. So let's look at the next scenario. Let's say that we lose the Boston wager for 200. Then the last wager, I only wagered what I call 1/10 unit, or $100 on Oakland. So let's say hypothetically we win Miami, but Boston and Oakland loses. We would still net out $450. 750 minus 300 equals 450. So we cash flowed, right? But let's talk about what actually happened. So we wager Boston, and I think I had to wager. Okay, yeah, we already know the results of the Boston one. So we wager Boston. Boston wins. So now we're up $952. Now here's why I only wagered 100 on Oakland. I could have wagered 200, right? However, I could have wagered $200 on Oakland, but look at Oakland's line. It was plus 176, right? So it's almost at 1/5 unit, which is $200. So I only wagered 100, right? Because if I win, I'm almost winning almost close to the same I made on the Boston, right? So I decided to only wager 100, and Oakland did, in fact, lose that. So what actually happened in this scenario, Miami won, Boston wins, Oakland lost. We ended up netting out $852. And here's another reason for lowering your wager, lowering the wager amount to protect the winning day. The first wager goes 1-0. Okay, you have 2 more wagers remaining, and not all the time this scenario is going to play out where you have time to see the results of the next wager. I understand that, and I'll cover that. I've got 2 more examples to show you. But what if you win the first wager and you got 2 more wagers left? What's the probability of going 3-0? It's not high, right? You're more likely to go 1-1 or 0-2 on the next 2 wagers, as opposed to 3-0. Why is that? That's called regression. Everything's regressing back to, quote, 50%. There's a 50% chance you have. So if we win the first one, now we're at 100%. It's very unlikely that we're going to sweep. So we have to plan that into our wagers. So in this particular example here, we netted out $852. All right, let's look at this next scenario. Now, here we only had 2 wagers. So the first one was Arizona, $333 we wagered, which is 1/3 unit, and that won. So now we're up $356. Now, let's say, and this is what a lot of people do, you have 1 more wager, you go, well, I'm going to wager the same thing I wagered on that one. Okay, if you do that and that loses, let's see how much you would have lost. Now, this is an important point here to make. So let's say we wager 129 divided by 3 is 430. I don't know if I had a calculator. So if we lose that, if we wager the same thing on Baltimore and it loses, we lose $430 on the Baltimore wager. We made $356 on Arizona. So what happens? We have a losing day. We're not cash flowing. So in this scenario, we knew that Arizona won, so we're up $356. So in this scenario, I wagered $200 on Baltimore. So if Baltimore loses, what happens? We're still going to cash flow and be profitable for that day, irregardless of the outcome. Now, fortunately, Baltimore won, so it was a profitable day. All right, does that make sense? So we're always thinking in terms of cash flowing. And let's look at the final example here. This is example we had 3 wagers. Again, the max we're going to wager would be $1,000 per day. And this is a scenario different than the first 2 because our first wager lost. So you say, what happens if this one loses? And it did. So, and this was August 10th. So this was recent. 333. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. 108 divided by 3. So we're in the hole, $360. Now, again, here's why I wagered the same thing. Very simple, because if we go 0-1 on our first wager, we have 2 more remaining, and factoring in regression, what is the likelihood of going 0-3? As compared to going 2-0 or 1-1. We're more likely to go 1-1, 1-2 than 0-3 on all the wagers. Does that make sense? So in this scenario, we wagered the same because, again, that gives us the best opportunity to cash flow. right? Because we can't wager less, right? Because then we would still end up, if those two wagers, like for example, if I cut it down to 1/5 unit, I could have done that, but if I would have split out, went 1 and 1, we would not have been profitable. So in this scenario, both Milwaukee and Arizona won. So we were profitable. We take the 666 minus 360. We ended up netting out $306 in that scenario. So I want to bring up this chart here again and explain to you how to calculate this. Now, in my opinion, people overcomplicate bankroll management. How much money do I wager per play? This makes it very, very simple. All you need to do first is calculate how much bankroll do you have. And I gave you 3 scenarios up here. You got 10,000, 1,000, or 500. So we'll use my example. So to order to wager this way, what I recommend is you need at least $10,000 bankroll. 10% of 10,000 is $1,000. So it doesn't regardless if you got 1 play, 2 plays, 3 plays, 5 plays. The most you wager per day would be $1,000. So the other benefit of this is mentally and fiscally, you know the max you're going to lose per day. So what's the max I'm going to lose each day? $1,000. Going back to that last scenario, if we lose all 3, if we'd lost the last 2, we'd be down 1,000. So that's a max we're going to lose each day. So over the course of the month, if the max I'm going to lose is only 10% of my bankroll, very easy to recover from that. All right. So it's very simple. So you have max wager is 10%. So if you have 2 plays, you could split it up, 500 on each play. If you have 3 plays, which you saw in that last wager, you can wager 333, which is what I call 1/3 unit on each play. 1/5 unit is basically $200, and then 1/10 unit would be $100. And over here, I got it for some common bankrolls. I think most people could probably put together a $1,000 bankroll, and then also calculated it for a $500 bankroll. And the way you calculate this, if you put it in Google Sheets, you would take half a unit is basically your bankroll divided by 2. 1/3 is your bankroll divided by 3. 1/5 is your bankroll divided by 5, and then 1/10 will be your bankroll divided by 10. So very, very simple way to calculate. And also, one word of caution: this is generally more suited for somebody that's going to have what you saw like we did. We had 2 or 3 plays generally. Sometimes we'll have 4. If I have 4 plays, I'll generally wager 1/5 unit so that we're not going over that 1,000 limit per day. Now, if you're just wagering 1 play per day, I'm not sure that I would do it this way, simply because let's say you have a really bad run, you go like on a 2-8 run. I mean, we just had an 0-6 run right before we went on this big run. So if you started wagering, you went on an 0-6 run, you would wipe out basically 60% of your bankroll. So I wouldn't do that. If you're wagering 1 play per day, I would take this down to, I wouldn't wager a full unit or 10% of your bankroll. I would use one of these lower amounts here, if that makes sense. So anyway, so very, very simple way to calculate your bankroll. Again, just to sort of review, whatever your bankroll is times 10%, that's going to be the most you wager per day, regardless if you got 1 play, 2 plays, 5 plays, etc. And then when you're wagering, you always want to think in terms of cash flow. And if you win your first wager, you win a decent amount, you hit a big dog like we did, you want to preserve that winning day and make sure, regardless of what happens beyond that, you're still cash flowing. So I hope that video helps. If you want access to these power rankings that have hit 44 units year to date for MLB, it's very simple. There's a link to join in the description box, $50 a month. You also get access to all of our coaching videos. We have about 150 coaching videos on the website. Somebody asked this question yesterday. We have about 30 videos, coaching videos related to building models. I know a lot of people that follow me are interested in doing that. Also, too, if you want access to all my personal plays, $100 a month. The best value is to join for an entire year. Instead of paying $100 a month, you can pay $4.99 one time. Gives you access to everything on the website. It's like getting an associate's degree in sports handicapping. Like this video if it brought you some value. Subscribe to the channel, and talk to you guys soon. Peace.